This is my new t-shirt, a bootleg Ralph Lauren with a healthy reminder never to trust the ruling class. But it's the XXL fit that I love the most. Before I ruin it with 2 hours in the tumble dryer, I'm going to try and clone it so I can make more. I started by cloning the pattern. I'm just copying what I've seen on With Wendy, but I made my own tutorial if you're wanting a quick run through of the process. I didn't have a large enough sheet of paper to fit the whole pattern, so I made a note to extend the pattern to the waist. I haven't added any seam allowance here, as I'm not sure what method I'm going to use to join these panels. As usual, I'm making things difficult for myself and refusing to use virgin fabric. Instead, I have this pile of old scrap jersey knit of various weights. This came from my first proper sewing project, when I made this blanket. The plan is to patchwork together enough fabric for the front, back and 2 sleeves. I make 3 templates of related sizes to add some variation so that I won't end up with just a basic grid pattern. I do some planning and realise that I will need 2 panels of 4 by 4.5 of the large template for the front and the back, and 2 panels of 2 by 4 for the sleeves, or 52 of the large squares in total. I get cutting, ironing out the fabric, placing the template, and not as carefully as I should, cutting out the panels, aiming to have a healthy mix of plain white and save some of the graphic elements that didn't make it into the quilt. I mix everything up into a big pile and start joining them with a straight stitch at random. I then get to do the fun thing of laying out all these pieces and figuring out a pattern. I'm a sucker for a white tee with a small chest graphic and a large back print, so I'm going to try and incorporate that into the final look. To finish the joins, I pressed the seams open and pulled this twin needle out of my sewing box. I'd never used this before but quickly figured it out, and I'm in love. If you've not used one of these before, I've made an in-depth guide to this too. Using the twin needle, I top stitch all the seams and trim the raw edges. I feel like I should point out here that jersey knit is horrible to sew with, and a serger or a walker foot would have really helped. But let's just pretend that this is going well and have another look at how pretty it's going to be when it's finished. Switching back and forth between the 2 needles messed with the setup of the machine. I also ran out of quality white thread and persisted with the cheap stuff from the supermarket. At one point my bobbin seemed to be all janky, and this all led to the top thread continually snapping, a broken needle, a tear down and clean of the machine, and a trip to the haberdashery to buy some much needed new kit. But with the gremlins all worked out, I was able to finish the 4 panels and I'm able to move on to construction. Starting with the sleeves panel, I iron out the fabric, fold it over and place the pattern piece. I'm going to use a French seam to join the panels. This is when you stitch the garment wrong sides together. Fold over that seam so that the garment is right sides together, and seam again so that the raw edge is captured inside the seam. I need to figure out how much seam allowance I will need to add to achieve this. I set my sewing machine so that the needle is at its furthest right position and measure the distance between the edge of the presser foot and the needle. I return the needle to its central position and take the same measurement. I then add these 2 together for my seam allowance. This is then added to the edge of the pattern. I mark the new pattern outline in chalk and cut out the sleeve. This is then repeated for the other sleeve. On the body panels, the collar won't have a French seam, so I'll leave my usual seam allowance. The panels are now ready to sew. Pinning the body panels wrong sides together, I straight stitch the shoulders and sides, turn it right sides together and press the seam. Then straight stitch again to lock the raw edge inside. I repeated the process on the sleeves, and after some confusion about how I should pin the sleeves to the body, the last 2 French seams are done. For the collar, I unpicked the collar from this old donor tee and pinned it to the body, making sure to place the collar seam at the centre back and taking my time to make sure the two pieces are evenly pinned. I straight stitch to attach, add a zigzag to stabilise the raw edge, and a top stitch to finish, and I have my collar on. Now, I hem the waist and sleeves before trimming the many dangling threads, and this is the final garment. There was a point in the middle where I really thought I was on a fool's errand with this one, that the final outcome would be completely unwearable. But this is totally wearable. The patchwork looks really interesting. I like how the black blocks fall on my shoulders, the king peeking out from the side, and the main lumberjack hit. Many of the key graphics that ended up in this came from a fast fashion rip-off of the classic Pyrex tee, and it still has a bit of an early Virgil look, as well as the obvious nods to Capital. Faults, there are many, but I'm not bothered about them. The front of the collar should drop a little deeper, and because of this it just doesn't sit quite right. There is a lot of puckering where the patches meet due to me overstretching the fabric when joining, and I think extending the sleeves past the elbow would have given a more intentional oversized look, but I can try that on another project. The inside is a rat's nest. A serger would have been a good option, but French seams on everything would have been quite luxurious. Regardless, this will never be seen outside of this video, so I'm not bothered. I plan to wear this and enjoy it for what it is.